On the morning of August 24, 79 AD, the people of Pompeii woke, believing it would be an ordinary day. Merchants opened their shops. Bakers prepared bread. Children ran through narrow streets. Sailors watched the Bay of Naples shimmer beneath the summer sun. Nothing about the morning suggested that by the following day, thousands would be dead and an entire city would vanish beneath volcanic ash. The mountain overlooking the region was so familiar that many residents barely noticed it anymore. Mount Vesuvius had become part of daily life. It dominated the horizon, provided fertile soil, and stood silently above one of the wealthiest regions of the Roman world. Yet there had been warnings. Years earlier, earthquakes had shaken the region. Small tremors continued occasionally. Buildings cracked. Repairs became common. Some residents worried. Most did not. Because human beings are remarkably good at adapting to danger when danger becomes familiar. The people of Pompeii had lived alongside tremors for years. Nothing catastrophic had happened. So life continued. Markets remained crowded. Villas hosted guests. Wine flowed. Business thrived. And somewhere beneath the mountain, pressure continued building. Unseen, unheard, unstoppable. Around midday, everything changed. Witnesses later described a strange cloud rising into the sky above Vesuvius. One Roman observer, Pliny the Younger, compared it to a pine tree spreading outward above the mountain. At first, many residents simply stared. Some were curious, some frightened, most confused, because nothing in living memory resembled what they were seeing. The cloud continued growing, higher, darker, wider. Soon ash began falling from the sky. At first it seemed harmless, almost like snow. Children reportedly watched it drift through the air. Adults discussed what it might mean. But the ash did not stop, and with every passing hour, the mountain became louder. The ground trembled. The sky darkened. And slowly, the people of Pompeii began realizing that this was not an earthquake, not a storm, not an inconvenience. It was the beginning of something far worse. As the afternoon progressed, the situation in Pompeii became increasingly difficult to ignore. The ash was no longer drifting gently from the sky. It was falling continuously. Roofs began collecting heavy layers of volcanic debris. Streets slowly disappeared beneath gray dust. Visibility worsened. Breathing became uncomfortable. And still, many people stayed. To modern audiences, that decision seems impossible to understand. Why didn't everyone run? Why didn't the entire city flee immediately? The answer is surprisingly human. Because disasters rarely look like disasters at first. Most residents of Pompeii had never witnessed a volcanic eruption. They had no historical reference point, no scientific understanding, no emergency broadcasts warning them that a mountain was about to destroy an entire city. What they saw was frightening, but not necessarily fatal, at least not yet. Some families gathered valuables, others packed food, some waited for instructions. Many simply hoped the situation would improve, and hope can be a dangerous thing during a catastrophe. As darkness approached, conditions deteriorated rapidly. Ash continued piling onto rooftops. Buildings groaned under increasing weight. Earthquakes shook the city repeatedly. Animals became agitated. Dogs barked. Horses panicked. The mountain continued roaring. For those who chose to leave early, escape remained possible. Roads were still open. The coastline was accessible. The worst had not yet arrived. But thousands delayed. Some refused to abandon homes built over generations. Some stayed to protect businesses. Some searched for missing relatives. Others simply froze. Because uncertainty often creates paralysis. And paralysis kills. Throughout the evening, panic spread unevenly across the city. Wealthy Romans abandoned luxurious villas. Servants carried valuables through crowded streets. Families moved through darkness illuminated only by oil lamps and flashes from the mountain. The sky itself began changing. Witnesses described conditions becoming so dark that day seemed to transform into night. Not ordinary night. Something worse. A darkness filled with ash, dust, smoke, and fear. People could no longer see landmarks clearly. Many became separated. Children lost parents. Parents lost children. And every tremor made the city feel less stable. Then came the collapses. One roof after another began failing beneath the weight of accumulated ash. Homes became traps. Courtyards became graves. Entire families suddenly found themselves buried inside structures they had trusted for years. Yet even now, the deadliest phase of the disaster had not arrived. Because the falling ash was only the beginning. The real killer was still moving down the slopes of Vesuvius. And most people in Pompeii had no idea it existed. By the early hours of the next morning, many survivors in Pompeii believed they had already endured the worst. The ashfall had been relentless. Buildings had collapsed. Families had become separated. The city had vanished beneath darkness. But despite everything, thousands of people were still alive. And that created a dangerous illusion. Survival. Throughout the night, survivors sheltered wherever they could. Some hid inside homes. Others crowded into public buildings. Many gathered belongings and waited for daylight, hoping conditions would improve enough to escape. No one knew what was coming, because nothing in Roman experience resembled what was now unfolding on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius. Deep inside the eruption column, something catastrophic had begun happening. The massive cloud rising above the volcano was becoming unstable, and when instability reached a critical point, gravity took over. Parts of the eruption column collapsed. What followed would later be known as a pyroclastic surge, a fast-moving wave of superheated gas, ash, and volcanic debris capable of moving across the landscape with terrifying speed. Unlike falling ash, it could not be outrun easily. Unlike earthquakes, it offered little warning. And unlike collapsing roofs, it did not target individual buildings. It consumed entire areas. The first surges devastated settlements closer to the volcano than Pompeii. Some communities disappeared almost instantly. People had no time to flee, no opportunity to prepare. Entire neighborhoods simply ceased to exist. Meanwhile, survivors inside Pompeii remained largely unaware of what had happened elsewhere. Many were exhausted, dehydrated, disoriented. Some believed dawn would bring relief. Instead, dawn brought death. As additional portions of the eruption column collapsed, larger surges began moving outward. Ash and toxic gases raced across the landscape. Temperatures reached levels impossible for human survival. And now, the disaster entered its final stage. Archaeological evidence discovered centuries later revealed a haunting picture. Many victims were found exactly where they had made their final decisions. Inside homes, in streets, near gates, holding belongings, protecting children. waiting for loved ones. Some appear to have attempted escape at the last moment. Others never moved at all, because the speed of the approaching surges left almost no time to react. The people of Pompeii had spent hours fearing falling ash. In reality, the greatest danger had always been something they could neither see nor fully understand: a wave of heat and ash moving toward them through darkness, silent compared to the roaring volcano, invisible compared to the towering eruption cloud, and far more lethal than anyone imagined. When the final pyroclastic surges reached Pompeii, the disaster stopped being a slow-moving crisis. It became immediate. For nearly 18 hours, the people of Pompeii had been making decisions. They had debated whether to leave, gathered belongings, protected families, searched for loved ones, hidden inside buildings, prayed to gods. Now, there was no time left for decisions. The surges moved across the landscape with devastating speed, carrying superheated gases, ash, and volcanic material capable of overwhelming entire districts almost instantly. Many victims likely never understood what reached them. One moment they were alive. The next, everything changed. For centuries, popular imagination pictured the people of Pompeii dying slowly beneath mountains of ash. The image became famous in paintings, novels, and films. The reality appears more complicated. Archaeological evidence suggests that many victims were overcome rapidly during the final stages of the eruption. Temperatures were extreme. Air became impossible to breathe. Visibility vanished completely. The city was no longer a city. It was a landscape of darkness, heat, and ash. Some victims were discovered huddled together. Families remained close during their final moments. Parents shielded children. Friends stayed beside one another. Others were found alone, separated from everyone they knew, scattered across streets they had walked their entire lives. One of the most haunting discoveries involved people who nearly escaped. Archaeologists uncovered victims near gates, roads, and routes leading away from the city. They had recognized the danger. They had chosen correctly. They were simply too late. And perhaps that is what makes Pompeii so tragic. Many people did everything they thought was necessary, but they were facing a disaster beyond anything they could understand. No Roman emergency plan existed for a volcanic catastrophe of this scale. No authority could explain what was happening. No messenger could accurately describe what was coming. The people of Pompeii were not foolish. They were unprepared, because almost anyone living in their world would have been. As dawn disappeared behind volcanic darkness, the final surges buried what remained of the city beneath layers of ash and debris. Buildings vanished. Roads disappeared. Gardens, workshops, bathhouses, temples, villas, and markets all disappeared beneath the same blanket of destruction, and with them vanished thousands of lives. Within hours, one of the most prosperous cities in Roman Italy ceased to exist. After the eruption ended, silence settled over the Bay of Naples. Where a thriving Roman city had stood, there was now only ash. The roads leading to Pompeii disappeared. Buildings were buried. Landmarks vanished. And gradually, memory itself began fading. In the years that followed, survivors relocated elsewhere. New lives were built. New generations grew up. The Roman Empire continued expanding. Emperors rose and fell. Wars came and went. Pompeii became a story, then a rumor, then almost nothing at all. For centuries, the city remained hidden beneath volcanic deposits. Farmers worked the land without fully understanding what lay beneath their feet. Travelers passed nearby unaware that entire neighborhoods, homes, and streets remained preserved below the surface. Time continued moving forward. Pompeii did not. And that is what makes the city unique. Most ancient cities change gradually. Buildings are rebuilt, roads altered, structures collapse and disappear. Pompeii was frozen, not intentionally, not perfectly, but enough. When excavations eventually began centuries later, archaeologists encountered something extraordinary. Streets still existed. Shops remained recognizable. Political graffiti survived on walls. Household objects remained where owners had left them. The city had become a time capsule, and among the most haunting discoveries were the victims themselves. The famous plaster casts created from voids left in hardened ash transformed Pompeii from an archaeological site into something deeply human. Suddenly, history no longer spoke only through buildings and artifacts. It spoke through people. A mother protecting a child. A man shielding his face. Friends huddled together. Citizens caught during their final attempts to survive. These discoveries changed how the world understood the disaster, because Pompeii was no longer simply a volcanic eruption. It became a record of human behavior during catastrophe. Fear, hope, confusion, love, denial, courage, all preserved beneath ash. That is why the last hours of Pompeii remain so powerful nearly 2,000 years later. Not because the city died. Cities die throughout history. Pompeii matters because it allows us to see ordinary people confronting the unimaginable. And perhaps the most unsettling truth of all is this. The people of Pompeii did not know they were living through history. They thought they were living through tomorrow.